C.A.Q. Sakaya Ditti, embodying one of the most dangerous of all delusions from the Buddhist point of view, is by the Psi. Connected with Ko, the phenomenal compound of 5 skandhas, and either with Sat, in the sense of being, or with say Am, one's own. C.F. S. N. versus D.H.P. verse. The latter explanation, Svakaya, is probably correct. Individuality, then, stands for this skandha complex, which we should now speak of as body and soul. Both term and theory are discussed by Dharmadina in M.I. The fourth upadana, or grasping after a theory of soul, is described in identical terms. C. Ditti, which is here rendered by theory, and which might with equal propriety be translated by speculation, or views. All 4 terms having a common etymological basis in the notion of seeing, or things seen, is in the answer rendered by opinion, as fitting better that mass of notions current among the mass of men, which in the case of the Pathujano does service for organized knowledge. Gautama might possibly have approved the Platonic description of doxa as something more dusky than knowledge, more luminous than ignorance. To translate by heresy, or delusion, has the disadvantage of necessitating the use of other terms in the case of sound ditti, such as that described in M. P. S. B.H. I. as ditti ariya nyanaka. Cf. below. Ida, a term, as the Psi says, either of localization, or of instance in giving instruction. Here used in the former sense, and meaning occurrence in the world. Asatava, lit. One who has not heard, i.e., not been taught, who through lack of investigation, inquiry, acquiring, in such matters as skandhas, elements, spheres, conditions, constituents, meditations, is without proper tradition and attainment. Ibid. Pathujano, the common worldling. The Psi cites verses distinguishing Vliom sensual moyen as either blind or amiable. Of these the former is here meant. In another quotation he is described as given to various common vices, governed by the individuality theory, hanging on the lips of various ordinary preachers, immersed in every kind of rebirth, complicating life with various common complexities, carried away by divers vulgar currents, appeased or feverish with various low sources of gratification or of irritation, steeped in, greedy of, entangled in, infatuated with, involved in, sticking to, held fast and hampered by, the 5 low pleasures of sense, veiled, muffled, shrouded in, closed and cloaked and covered up by, the 5 low hindrances, as absorbed among the countless folk in the past of low character and conduct opposed to noble doctrine, or, finally, as one separate and distinct from those noble folk who are given to virtue and learning. Ariyanamadasavi, referring either to the Buddhas, the Pacceka Buddhas and the disciples of the Buddhas, or to the Buddhas only. Buddhaghosa points out at some length that the inability to perceive, lit. C. holy persons is no mere visual shortcoming, but a lack of insight or of intelligent inference. The truly noble, as such, seen with the bodily, or with the divine eye, are not really seen. Their appearance is apprehended, but not the area of their noble nature, even as dogs and jackals, etc. See them and know them not. Even the personal attendant of a thera may not discern the hero in his master. So hard is it without insight and understanding to discern the standpoint attained by the saints, or the conditions of true nobility. What is to thee this vile body that thou shayest, Vakali? He who seeth the doctrine, he it is who seeth mel. S. E. P. Semicolon. Dot. Avenito. The Psi enumerates, with examples, the 5 modes of the discipline of self-control, and of that of renunciation. These are given in Childers. S. V. Vinayo. Sapurisa, meaning Pacceka Buddhas and the disciples of the Buddhas. These 4 views, respecting the relation of each skandha to a conceivable central entity or atta, are discussed in my introduction. All, according to the Psi, are obstacles to the paths, though not to heaven, and are overcome during progress through the first path. Ida Pakayata. C. The specific former of doubt are thus commented on. As to whether or no the teacher has the major bodily marks, or the minor bodily marks of a Buddha, or the requisite omniscience with respect to things past, future and present. As to the adequacy of the paths and their fruits to lead indeed to the grand ambrosial nirvana. As to whether those of the order are indeed at various stages of the path to salvation, or have rightly won their way so far. As to whether the training is helpful. As to whether evolution by way of skandhas, dhehatas and ayatanas has held in the past, or will hold in the future. As to whether there is a 12-graded cycle of causation, taking effect here and now or taking effect at all. Ito Bahida. I have ventured to adopt a reading differing slightly from that both of the text and of K. The sense seems to demand it and the Psi to imply it. The latter has Sienat Gosaladina, Vatena T Govatadina Va, SL Labatina T Taduaina, Sudi T Kalesa Sudi Paramata Sudabutam Va Nibbanam Eva. But it would not be in accordance with the methods of the Psi to quote Vatena T if Sudivatina stood in the text. As to the terms Gosila, Govatam, it is not clear what were the practices and mode of life followed in the bovine morals, etc. of those who were called Gavatika, or in the canine practices of the Kukuravatika. Both are named in M. I. K.H. P. Psi. P. Sudi, it will be seen, is distinguished as, on the one hand, the mere renunciation of the kilesas, on the other, perfect holiness or nirvana. On Salabata Paramazo, see Rhys David's American Lectures. These are said to be chiefly speculation and perplexity, and, besides these, lust, hate, dullness, pride, stolidity, excitement, unconscientiousness, disregard of blame, or practice. Bhavana, the collective name for the systematized effort in self-training of the disciple who, having attained insight, leaves the principles of the doctrine, that he may go on unto perfection, in other words, travel along the 3 higher paths to arahatship. On the powers of Bhavana, C.A.I. In A.I. The one thing needful for the perfecting of Bhavana is said to be Kayagata Sati, mindfulness in what concerns the body, or bodily action. Hence only Akasala Dharma, bad states, can be put away by insight and culture. Nor can even these 2 avail in mutual independence, for c. the rest of one's karma goes on accumulating. The good and the indeterminate, the modes of matter, and simple element. These cannot cease for any individual until, according to Buddhaghosa, his abhisankara vinanam, his constructing, storing intellect, itself dies out with the extinction of his life as arahat. See Sum. On the Kevadha Sutta, D. I. Dialogues of the Buddha, I. Etsek. Pahataba hetuka, that is, the cause of them is to be put away by insight. Ere the reading in the text is obviously corrupt. I follow that in K. Viz. Tata Katama Sakai Diti. P. I am Vukati Sakai Diti, and so on. This paragraph, in which I again follow K, is not included in the text at all. Nevertheless, Buddhaghosa comments on it. Here again I follow K. In reading Pahataba Hetu for Hetuka, Buddhaghosa quotes the former reading, as referring to the putting away of dullness accompanied by excitement. Apakayagamino. On its opposite, cp. Note. The latter is tantamount to going to nirvana. The two processes are compared to the building up and pulling down of a wall. Sekha, i.e., springing up in the 3, or in the 7 courses of training. A sekha implies that the student or probationer has perfected his studies and training and is become an adept, an arahat. C.F. P. On the term, fruits of the life of the recluse, see the Samayanaphala Sutta, d. I. Uparathimam, a term used in P. I. A Q, where it is applied to the fetters, which are put off last cf. below, and P. See also P. N. Paratam, understood as involving intellectual and ethical, as well as physical insignificance, the connotation of the French term born. The illustration chosen is that of a lump of cow dung. The essential quality is apanubhavata, i.e., of little importance or efficacy generally. Paratam itself is ranked as an equivalent of the whole sphere of sense experience. Mahagata, i.e., in respect of the ability to resist vice, of abundance of good result, of wide extension, or of the attainment to a high pitch of will, energy, thought or wisdom. Ibad. Apamana, or without measure. This is a long and cumbersome periphrasis for Cittasitasika Dharma, but a reference to will show that such is the content of the term. And Western psychology has not suggested to me any more compressed equivalent. Cf. However, emotional must be taken in its more limited sense, as the adjective to bare feeling or hedonic consciousness. C. The 3 subjects of this triplet of inquiry, Dharma-hina, Majjhima, Pa-nit-a, are paraphrased as Lamaka, midway between this and the 3rd quality, and supramundane or ideal. Mikhataniyata, thus explained by the Psi. Wickedness is that wrongful disposition which, in its desire for happiness, sees benefit in things baneful and persists in this perversion. Fixed in its consequences, means yielding a result immediately on the disintegration of the skandhas. Cf. M. P. S. Asmi. Niyato, I am fixed or sure. Also K. V. and P. Katamo ca pugalo niyato. The answer to this question is practically identical with those given in these sections. It is the persons who are decisively good and bad that are called anantarika instead of the acts, or the paths, as in the Dhs. These 5 acts, the Psi says, refer to matricide, etc. As though the abhidharmas were here alluded to, whereas the 5 usually classed under this name appear to be murder, theft, impurity, lying and intemperance. Cf. Compare the passage relating to Lohitapado, or the wounding of a Buddha, yin. E. Which is called an anantarika kaman. I venture to think that, in the mill. P. The phrase kopavikanantariya kaman karati is not intended, as the translator infers, to sum up the 5 offenses previously specified, but is an allusion to 5 others, of which matricide was one and lohitapado another. It only remains to ascertain whether or not the other 3 coincide with any other 3 of the 6 abhidharmas. as to the immediacy of their consequences. Whereas, from the Devadatta incident in the Kulavagga, the outrages entailed at least some of their retribution in this life. It will have been seen that, according to Buddhaghosa, the effect is experienced immediately after the cessation of the present life. The Sai goes on. In the case of these acts, it is impossible for any other conduct to push off the karma of any one of them, so as to obtain room for the realization of its own consequences. Neither could the agent effect this if he were to build a golden stupa as big as Mt. Sineru, or a vihara covered with gems and like a world orb, or if he filled it with bhikkhus and their Buddha and found them in the four requisites during a whole lifetime. The wrong views which are also niyata are specified in the Sai as those held by the anti-causationists, those who denied the efficacy of action, and the nihilists. These are past praying for. More literally rendered, not 100, nor yet 1,000 Buddhas would be able to enlighten them. Ibid. The reading should be Samatha Niyata. C.F. K. K. V. Path means the quest of nirvana, or the progress in the destruction of the kilesas. Maggahetuka, i.e., the cause of those in the sense of conditioning him is the Eightfold Path. Later the Sai gives the purport of this triad as follows. In the first formula, the kind of causal conjunction of the skandhas, in their connection with the path by way of cause, in the sense of condition, is set forth. In the second, the kind of causal conjunction of the other parts of the path with 8 views, which are a constituent of the path and are reckoned as cause. And in the third, the kind of causal conjunction of right views with those causes that are operative in the path, is set forth. Yet in the text it is the causal connection of the 4 skandhas that is predicated about in all 3 formulae. Does this implicate discrepant versions of the text? Ariyamagazamonjisa Magingani. In the printed text, after a mo-ho read ime dharma maga hetu. Cf. Sai. K. Also above. Magadipatino, i.e., the path, having them under its control in the sense of maintaining them, is the governor. Later we get supplementary remarks showing that the relation of governor and governed, in this connection, resembles that between Christ and the believer who brings into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. All such thoughts or states are insignificant as compared with the one great object of devotion, the path, the fruit, nirvana. Even to contemplate the progress of others in the path, or to have seen the Tathagata work a double miracle, is not precious to the student as is his own discernment and realization of what the path means to him. The construction in this sentence is obscure. Vimamsadhipathayam is apparently in the nominative case. The Sai, however, substitutes, in quoting, the instrumental, which only makes the reading obscurer. Anyway, it proceeds to explain that the term shows a joint supremacy between the path and anadhipathayam to be only possible when the latter is either investigation or energy. When the latter is desire or a thought, then the path yields its sway over the mind to the adhipathayam. But when the student makes either of the former his governing influence, both it and the path are his joint governors. Upana, i.e., which from the moment they came into being, and for as long as they had distinguishable being, have come to pass and been sustained. Read Nibbata, Abhinibbata. Upadino, i.e., will certainly arise from the fact that their efficient cause is in part completed. Later, the potential happening of these resultant states is declared to be due to the enduring validity of their conditions, which cannot fail to produce their effects, even though eons intervene. The Gospel, lit. Path, of the future Buddha, Mettera, is a Nupano, but his fruition belongs to the Upadino Dharma. Avapakavipakanam. Inserted in K. But, as is stated in that edition, not inserted in the Burmese or the European text. The printed text reads Nirodhangata. The Sai. Nirada Vagata. K. Nirada Parinata. Abhinibhata is omitted in the printed text. C.F. Also K. Pakapana, the word rendered by present in the question. Cf. Our obvious, objective, object, in its most general psychological sense, as something present to the subject of the mental states. Cf. On Ajata and Bahida cf. The Sai distinguishes four varieties in the connotation of ajatam, namely, Gokarajatam, Niyakajatam, Ajatajatam and Vasayajatam, two of which are identical with two of the three meanings cited by Childers. The specific meaning used here is said to be the second. For Niyata read Niyaka, that is, all beings except one's self. Upadina is omitted in the printed text. Tad Ubayam is the curt answer. It is to be regretted that Buddhahosa's fertility in illustration was not applied to this species of Dhamma. Incidentally, one gathers that they alternate between self-reference and reference to other selves. For whereas the Dharma in the first and third questions are said to be either limited or enlarged, and those in the second are said to be infinite, states that are infinite are said not to take as their object that which now relates to the external, now to the self. Cf. A.C.Q.